Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and our mission is to bring you the real news. Each and every week, we release a lot of content that includes information from you guys, our field messengers, our boots on the ground, who's telling us what's going on in your communities. We have in-depth news that the team and I work on for you guys, where we go a little bit further into some of those headlines you may have seen online to give you the story behind the story. And then, of course, we have updates from the Global Intelligence Agency in this whole big battle that's going on right now that, fingers crossed, is about to wrap up. You guys can feel it out there, I'm sure. This battle of good versus evil, and they're throwing everything they can at us right now, and we're going to get into that in just a bit when we go into the Global Intelligence Agency report, because Kim's got a lot of good info to share with us. If you want more information about United Network and who we are and all the various things we do, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. What you're listening to here, this podcast is a week in review. So I go through all the stories and I basically just give you the 30,000-foot view. I give you highlights of each of the stories. It's a great way to catch up on something you may have missed because, again, a lot of content goes out. Or if you want to share UNN with other people, because when our content first goes out, it's available exclusively to our members for the first week. Then after that, we put it out on YouTube and Rumble. But if you want the information right away, you either got to become a member or get these snippets from the Rundown report. So hopefully this helps you guys out, and hopefully I can break some things down for you and maybe explain them in a little bit different way. And, with anything that you're checking out online, any shows, any podcasts, think critically about what you're listening to. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of people specifically trying to lead people astray, which is disinformation. And so you really have to use your intuition to figure things out, right? We talk a lot about discernment. You have to be able to figure things out. Is this right for me? Is this not right for me? Does this seem like truth? Does it seem like more propaganda? And then when you figure some stuff out, share it with other people, including episodes of The Rundown. So let's dive into it. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. All right, kicking things off with our field messengers. And really, the field messengers are what our news is all about. For far too long, we've had so many middlemen between us and the truth. And we only get the snippets. We only see just the tip of the iceberg of how we've been led astray, right? But darkness doesn't like it when you shine the light on it, right? So these beings and whatever that have kind of been ruling our whole world for a long time, they live in the shadows, literally and figuratively. And the more mystical and elusive they can be, the better off for them, right? So we need to bring everything back into the light and really understand what's going on in our world. And we think our field messengers are the best way to do that, because that is you guys telling us what's going on in your community. Just grabbing your phones, recording some information, and sharing it with us. And by the way, if you are thinking about becoming a field messenger, we do have weekly meetings that you can join on Zoom. And we've been doing some kind of like field messenger workshops, if you will. So I've been coming on and sharing some tips and tricks of what I've learned in news over the years, and kind of like a little Q&A, and people share stories, and it's really helpful. We also have a Telegram group if you guys want to hop on there and ask some questions if you're working on a story. We are here to support you and help you every step of the way. And of course, then we have our production team that once you record the information and send it to us, then they put it together and then we put it up on the news. That's how the whole process works. So let's talk about some of the stories that were shared with us this week. We have some really more hard-hitting news stories, I would say, kicking things off with Diane in Uganda, who talks about, and this is, by the way, in eastern Uganda. So there was a government initiative. I love how they jazz things up with fancy words, because really what they're trying to do is take away the businesses of everyday Ugandans. So this initiative was to clear roadsides, and this forced many small businesses to relocate because You'll see it in the video, but a lot of these businesses, it looks like they're almost stacked. So you'll have one business and another business right in front of it. So basically they said, hey, we got to clear these roads. We've got to make more room. And that meant a ton of little tiny, I would call them mom and pop kind of businesses, had to move. And guys, get this. They had 2 days to move. They had to move back about 50 meters. So either they moved their building back or they had to relocate. And a lot of these people couldn't move, so they just had to leave. And if it was still there, the council said they were going to come in and bulldoze them. And by the way, this is happening nationwide in Uganda. And Diane did a little bit of digging, and she found out that about half of the businesses in her area have now disappeared as a result of this. And she also says some of the remaining businesses are reporting that their revenue is down 50% because they were really relying on people just walking or driving or whatever to see their business. And, if you don't have that kind of exposure, it's like with any place, if you're way back off the road and off to the side and people don't even know you exist, right? It's hard to get customers. So it's a real shame. And 2 days? I mean, can you imagine if that happened in your community? There'd be protests. We'd have war here, I think, in the United States. All right, Sephora Imana from Canada talks about some intellectual property theft that is going on. She says this is leaving many inventors and creators fighting to protect their work. So this is crazy because these people basically, I don't know if it's exactly like a copyright, but they would file their inventions with an office, right? Government related, I believe. And she says more than 1,000 inventors have been impacted by this by 2003. Now, here's the crazy thing. She talks to someone who has been dealing with this for a long time, and he has in writing that these people have said, yeah, I filed your stuff and then I decided to just sell it to someone else. He actually has paperwork that says, I guess they're honest criminals. I don't know. But all these other people involved in his invention, which I don't remember what the invention was, or even if, we asked about that. But all these other people made multi-million dollars, he said. And he was trying to do things the quote unquote, right way by filing this, and then they just stole it. And, this is not the only country, like I said, was this Canada? This is not the only country dealing with this. This happens in many, many places, and it's not right. And as part of this whole restoration of our planet, this is not going to happen. You don't get to just steal someone else's work and profit off of it, make money off of it. That is not okay. It's just mind-blowing to me. Rafaela from Germany shows us this video. You really got to see it to believe it. And she basically has to narrate this for us because she says she observed the sun rising in the west instead of the east. Now, what she shows us on the video is what the sky kind of looks like. We don't actually see the sun. And even if we did see the sun, it would be hard for us. So we don't know her area, right? It would be hard for us to know, oh, this is supposed to be east and this is supposed to be west. But what we did see is the sky where the sun was somewhere near, was this, beautiful shade of like orange and pinks. And, she says that's not where the sun is supposed to be, again, kind of hard to tell from the video, but it makes you wonder, we talk a lot about living in this false reality, this artificial matrix. Are weird things going to start happening like this? Because if everything is artificial, then nothing is set in stone, right? It's like, well, maybe one day it is going to rise in the west and set in the east. Who knows? But a very interesting video. Thank you so much for that. Akira from Japan takes us to the cherry blossom season in Tokyo and all their amazing parks. One of the things that he said, which I didn't realize, is that when the cherry blossoms bloom, it only really lasts for a week or so. I had no idea. These, obviously, they're absolutely gorgeous. And I thought it was really nice that everyone would come out and, go to these parks. And they even have cherry blossom viewing parties. All of that's amazing and, very communal. Awesome. But I was like, well, this probably happens for like a month or something. No, a week. Incredible. So we got to see all these beautiful cherry blossoms. By the way, I have some fake cherry blossoms in my house. That does not compare at all. But now every time I look at it, I'm going to think of Akira's story. All right, Amy out of New Jersey. I guess we're kind of continuing with this spring theme here because in her neck of the woods, things are starting to transform and she's noticing it. Apparently, she has soft pink cherry blossoms and she's just appreciating what's going on. Sometimes we forget to just look around. Oh, yeah, the seasons are changing. Here in Southern California where I'm at, we don't see a lot of seasonal change. So I really do appreciate these reports. Heading on over to the other side of the world. So Rick goes on some really cool vacations, but I don't know, Rick, they're really like adventures. He needs his own show or something. So this time he's in Egypt and he's in Alexandria, which I've actually been there. They have incredible museums in Alexandria, but he's at a catacomb. So catacombs are burial sites. This particular one was from the 2nd century AD. And it was a merger, I guess I would call it, of different cultures. So you had Egyptian, Greek, and Roman cultures that were intertwined in this catacomb. So it was very beautiful underneath, a lot of beautiful artwork and things like that on the walls. But you could tell, wow, this is more Egyptian. This has Greek columns over here. There was kind of a mixture of different things. And so he gives us a little bit more of the history. One of the things that he talked about that I thought was interesting is that these catacombs would have these larger rooms. He called it a funeral banquet hall. I think it has a different term as well, but that's like the simple way to describe it. And so people would come down and kind of commune and eat with their relatives that were passed away. I don't know. I was like, I don't know if I really want to eat in a catacomb. I don't know. Is that kind of a more unusual experience? Maybe it's part of like the burial process. All of these are different burial customs, but still very interesting. All right, Emma out of Spain, she is in Fuerteventura, which is part of the Canary Islands, and she takes us back to the Greenhouse Restaurant. You guys might remember this place because they have this incredible garden. I don't think they've got a ton of land, but man, do they use it wisely. And so they use this garden and they cook with all these things that they grow. So, unusual concept, right? What a concept. Let's grow our own food and eat it. So this report focuses more on edible flowers. That may not be high on your list of foods that you want to try, but many flowers are edible and they can really add a lot to a meal. So Emma shows us how this restaurant is cooking with flowers. Sometimes it's placed more as decoration, but you can still eat the flowers. Sometimes it's mixed in with various soups and things like that, or the meal itself. She even talked about something called the special electrical flower, which can create some temporary numbness in your mouth. And I think she took some pictures of whoever she was with and kind of an interesting experience, right? We got to see some of the photos. So there you go. Veronica out of Norway. Oh, I love this story because if I could just live on a little farm, I would. And hopefully sometime in the very near future, I will. But Veronica is kind of living my dream right now because she bought a mini farm a couple years ago, 2 years ago, I think she said. And she's in Norway. And now she is adding more and more animals to the mix. But she doesn't have a ton of animals, which that's probably the best way to grow, right? Is to start out with something small, figure out how things work, and then you can add to it. But her recent addition was peacocks. But she had some sheep. In fact, I think she said that sheep were pregnant. So, they're going to have babies soon, which that must be an amazing experience. She is raising chickens. They have some rabbits and let's see what else. Bees. They have bees. Oh, that's another thing. I really want to raise bees. I think that's amazing. And she's also trying to grow her own food. She had some raised garden beds that she's trying to grow things in. And it seemed like that was going a little bit slower, but her goal is to become self-sustainable, really to be able to eat, whether it's the plants, the animals, or whatever, be able to consume that and live off that because she doesn't want to feed into the system. And I completely get that. And our final report this week comes from Annette out of Canada. This is a scary one, guys. You really got to see this to believe it. And For those of you who have gardening experience, I'm sure, your heart really goes out to people that struggle with incredible weeds, right? So we're calling this the strangling weed because it was literally strangling these blueberry and raspberry bushes. And it's a very persistent weed. And her friend had this growing, and Annette went over to help her friend remove this. And you should see like the wheelbarrows just full of this. I don't even know what to call it. It looked like a very dry, stringy weed. And it was nestled in with all of the plants, literally strangling these plants. And, when you see this, here's the thing, guys. You know what it reminded me of? It was like if the deep state was a weed, this is what it would be doing, right? We're the plants, and the deep state it's like hands and everything, just all up in our business. We're just trying to grow and live naturally. And they're like, here, let me come and let me get you. And it makes me wonder, truly, did God, meaning the creator of the universe, the real God, will the real God please stand up? Please stand up. Did God actually create this weed? Because I can't think of a single good use for it. I mean, it's parasitic. So why does it exist? Truly, it's like the deep state, right? And, I'm going to add one more thing to that list, and that's mosquitoes. I think both of those things shouldn't even exist. I think they're from the Matrix, and, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So here are some of the news stories the team and I worked on for you guys this week. Kicking things off with a tourism tax. Who doesn't love a tourism tax? So more and more destinations around the world are introducing or increasing tourism taxes as governments look for ways to manage overcrowding, protect infrastructure, and fund environmental efforts.
Yeah, if you want to go to Barcelona, it's going to cost you a pretty penny because the city has just doubled its tourist tax. A tourist tax is when a place starts charging tourists a fee to visit and is usually put in place to help protect a city or country from over-tourism, which basically means there are too many visitors. This is a big problem in Barcelona because all those tourists need a place to stay, and officials say that leaves less places for locals to live.
While travelers may notice a few extra euros added to hotel stays or visitor fees, research suggests these modest taxes rarely discourage tourism overall, since they make up only a tiny fraction of the total cost of a trip. The bigger question is whether the money is actually used effectively. Like, what are they using this money for, right? If funds improve public spaces, transportation, sustainability, or housing for locals, the taxes can strengthen a destination long term. But if travelers and residents don't see real benefits, public support can fade quickly. South Africa's housing crisis remains deeply tied to the legacy of apartheid, with millions still struggling to access safe, affordable housing, while informal settlements continue to grow around major cities like Cape Town.
So Cape Town's housing crisis is now officially making global headlines, and it's over a report showing that around 70% of downtown housing is dedicated to short-term rentals for tourists. Yeah, 70%. International papers like the New York Times are covering how Cape Town Centre has become unaffordable for locals. News that might be new to the rest of the world, but isn't new to Cape Townians.
Many low-income families, young workers, and elderly residents face overcrowded living conditions, long waiting lists for subsidized housing, and unreliable access to water, sanitation, and electricity. Rising property prices, tourism-driven development, and ongoing inequality have intensified pressure on vulnerable communities, often leading to displacement when valuable land is targeted for redevelopment. While affordable housing and infrastructure investment are widely seen as key solutions, critics argue government corruption, stalled projects, and poor housing delivery have allowed the crisis to persist, widening the gap between economic growth and everyday living conditions. Well, whole body donation, meaning our bodies, donating the whole body in the U.S., that operates very differently from traditional organ donation, with far less centralized oversight and a growing commercial industry built around donated human remains. While many programs support legitimate medical training and research, private body broker companies, yes, they really do exist, can distribute or divide donated bodies for a variety of uses that families may not fully understand when giving consent.
A body broker is the person that takes their body, processes it, and sends that body where it needs to go. And before you say, gross, there is no way I'm doing this, know that for every body you collect, you can sell it for at least $5,000. Now do I have your attention? And you don't even need any special licenses or equipment to do it. All you need is a strong stomach and the right connections.
How easy is it for someone to enter this industry?
Do you have a Sawzall? You have a garage?
A person with no medical experience, no funeral director's license, was able to open up a whole body donation program, take possession of a human body, dismember it, send it throughout the nation without any type of licensing oversight. It's harder to sell hot dogs on a cart than it is to get into this business.
Critics say the lack of consistent federal regulation creates major transparency concerns, especially as donated tissue is increasingly tied to profitable medical and cosmetic products like fat grafting materials. The debate has intensified around whether donors truly understand how their bodies may be used commercially, raising ethical questions about consent, accountability, and the business of human body donation. Dental insurance in the U.S. often works less like true health insurance or medical insurance and more like a limited discount program with low annual coverage caps that have barely changed since the 1970s despite rising costs. While plans typically cover preventative care, patients can face major out-of-pocket expenses for more serious procedures, especially when treatments are deemed cosmetic or exceed yearly limits.
Dental insurance is a scam. Dental insurance makes you think that it works like medical insurance, but it really doesn't. All dental insurance is a discount coupon plan with blackout dates. So the way dental insurance works is they have discounted fees that they allow the dentist to charge the patients who are in the insurance plan. This is great for patients because they can get discounted dental care. However, they only cover up to $2,000 for treatment a year, along with some basic cleanings and x-rays. So while this is good for very basic entry-level care, if you actually have dental treatment that you need to take care of, the dental insurance is not going to cover as much as you would think.
At the same time, the dental industry itself is becoming increasingly corporate, with large insurers like Delta Dental dominating the market and more practices being absorbed into dental support organizations, or commonly known as DSOs. Supporters say DSOs help manage the business side of dentistry. But critics worry that growing corporate influence and private equity ownership may prioritize profits over patient care, leaving many patients confused about coverage, pricing, and who is really making decisions behind the scenes. Harare is facing a worsening water crisis driven by aging infrastructure, pollution, unreliable treatment systems, and allegations of corruption. Large amounts of treated water are lost through leaks, while the city's main water source, Lake Chivero, has become heavily contaminated, forcing many residents to rely on boreholes or unsafe water sources. Frequent shortages have raised fear of cholera outbreaks and left families spending hours searching for clean water.
I live in an area in Harare that hasn't received piped water in about 20 to 25 years. No piped water. If you are lucky, you can drill a borehole. If not, you have to buy water. Now, the pipes that used to carry water to people's homes are long dead, gone, rusted. They will never work again. It doesn't take much time for pipes that carry water to deteriorate to a point where they don't work anymore. And so, this means if ever this city recovers, the city of Harare will have to dig up the entire water piping of this neighborhood. Now, you and I know that will never happen. The city doesn't have the resources or the wherewithal to do something like that.
City officials are now introducing prepaid water meters to improve revenue collection, but many residents argue it is unfair to charge up front for an already unreliable service. At the same time, accusations of financial mismanagement and questionable infrastructure contracts have fueled growing public distrust, with many residents believing the crisis has been worsened by corruption as much as by technical failures. New travel rules introduced in April 2026 have made it much more complicated for UK pet owners to bring animals into the European Union following Brexit-related changes. Previously used EU pet passports issued in the UK can no longer be relied on for entry, meaning travelers now need a new Animal Health Certificate, AHC, from a vet for every trip. The updated system has increased costs, paperwork, and stress for frequent travelers, especially those with second homes or family connections in Europe.
AHCs are understandably pretty unpopular with owners, partially because of the cost. They're expensive at about £200 plus each time you get one, and they add administrative stress because they need to be done 1 to 10 days before you leave the UK. That might mean having to take time off work to go to the vet. Vets also don't typically enjoy them very much because they are a lot of paperwork, which is not our favourite thing, and they're pretty boring to do and also quite stressful because if we make a small mistake, that could ruin someone's holiday.
At the same time, EU border checks have become far stricter, with incorrect documentation potentially leading to quarantine, denied entry, or costly penalties. While the core health requirements for pets remain the same, including microchips and rabies vaccinations, enforcement is now much more rigorous. India has launched its first fully digital census, marking a major shift in how the world's largest population is counted and mapped. Instead of relying mainly on paper forms, the 2026 census uses online systems, mobile tools, and limited self-reporting options, while millions of enumerators still travel door to door to verify information and reach households without reliable internet access.
India is finally ditching the clipboard. The 2027 census is going 100% digital, and it's going to change how the country sees itself. The biggest upgrade, self-enumeration. You won't have to wait for someone to knock on your door. You can log into a dedicated portal on your phone and fill in your family's details yourself. It's secure, fast, and paperless. The self-enumeration facility will be conducted over a 15-day period, starting April 1st to August 31st.
The census will collect highly detailed data on housing, education, employment, income, and caste, making it one of the country's most ambitious data gathering efforts ever. Supporters say the digital system could improve efficiency and create a more precise national picture, but critics warn about privacy risks, cybersecurity concerns, and the possibility of errors or missed populations in a project this massive and technologically complex. Detention camps in northeastern Syria emerged after the collapse of ISIS's territorial control in 2019, holding tens of thousands of suspected fighters and family members, many of them women and children. Originally intended as temporary facilities, the camps evolved into overcrowded, underfunded detention systems with no clear legal process or long-term solution.
In the middle of this desert, suddenly there's a massive city of tent appear, and then you go inside the city, every element is there. They had a bazaar, they had a tailor, they had baker. You could see people sell stuff.
They talk about 60 nations having presence in these camps.
Some children grew up in the camps having never seen a normal building, a street, normal shops. It's a detention facility that is heavily guarded.
Conditions have been widely criticized for poor health care, inadequate food, and years of indefinite detention without charges. While many countries have resisted repatriating their citizens due to political and security concerns. In 2026, major shifts on the ground, including the breakdown of the Al-Hol camp and transfers of detainees to other camps and Iraq, highlighted the instability of the situation. The broader crisis remains unresolved, with governments struggling to balance security fears against growing humanitarian concerns, especially for children who have spent so much of their lives trapped inside these camps. A U.S. appeals court has ruled that the federal ban on home distilling, in place since 1868, is unconstitutional, reigniting debate over personal freedom, taxation, and alcohol regulation. The original law was created after the Civil War to protect federal tax revenue by banning homemade spirits, even though home beer and wine production later became legal. The court argued that outright prohibition may no longer be a reasonable way to enforce taxes, suggesting regulation would make more sense in a modern system. However, the decision does not automatically legalize home distilling nationwide, since state laws still apply and some states are continuing to enforce existing bans.
What this actually allows people to do is now apply for a permit to distill at their homes. And if they get that permit, then they're going to have to now log what they make and they're going to have to pay excise tax on it. It's not that much money. I would totally pay that much money. You know, it was like $14 per proof gallon or something like that. I'd do that for the pleasure and the ability to distill my own whiskey at home. However, there's a big problem here I think that a lot of people aren't going to be probably thinking about, which is this. We have roughly like 3 sets of hierarchies of laws in the United States, and probably more if you really wanted to get granular. But we have federal, we have state, and we have local. This here it's a federal law change. This is they've changed the federal laws on one's ability to get a permit to distill at home. That doesn't mean now, though, that like Texas, for example, is automatically going to let you get a permit at home to distill.
Supporters see the ruling as a victory for hobbyists and small-scale producers, while critics warn about safety risks and the challenges of regulating homemade spirits. Moving on to updates from the Global Intelligence Agency, Kim Gogan is the head of the GIA, and she released a report. Well, the date that it came out, I think, was they started it one day and there were complications. So I'm not even sure what day it was released, but it was since the last rundown report. And there's a lot of good stuff to go over. I think I have 4 sound bites for you guys. So, you know, the media is insane, right? And you have to wonder who is behind all this information that's going out in the media. Well, we have an answer for you guys. It is the Jesuit order. The Jesuit order was given control over all of mainstream media, at least for a time, and that wasn't going so well for them. So then the Q people, you know, that 17th letter of the alphabet that loves to put out a bunch of disinformation about JFK Jr. still alive and, you know, the quantum financial system, you know, we're going to have this big reset and it's going to start with the Iraqi dinar and all this kind of stuff. Those Q people, well, now they believe they are in control. And as you can tell, the narrative hasn't got much better. Here's Kim with more.
It appears the Jesuit order has been given the task and control of all mainstream media out there. You might have heard not too long ago, within the last week or so, Ted Turner has passed away. He was a long-standing mainstream media bag boy for the deep state. And the Jesuits are taking over most of the major mainstream media channels, including Viacom and other conglomerates that are at the head. Disney is another one. So this happened a few months back, and apparently around that same time, coincidentally, they were all having internal discussions about possibly talking to us, because it doesn't appear that the people that they've been working for and report to, because there's a hierarchy there too, that they were getting anywhere. It seemed like everybody was going around in circle. They were considering many different options, and we were one of those options. Well, what happens when you consider leaving the deep state with a large group of people and maybe changing the way that you do things? Well, the Q people roll themselves in there and convince them that they are now going to be in charge of the entire worldwide media. That includes social media and your YouTube and your Rumble and all those other channels as well. So they are the ones that have been putting out the narrative now for about the last 4 months or so. So everything you're seeing in the confusing news that's out there, they're trying very hard to hold up the narrative. But when you work for a bunch of cracked out cokeheads, this is kind of what you get. So they're trying to hold things together. They're being told that they're going to be in charge of disclosure in all of these types of things. But is it real disclosure? Not really. So I guess you could say they're in charge of fake narratives and non-disclosure / fake disclosure. And we now have all over the place narratives. It's going up, it's going down. There's one day, this guy's the greatest guy in the world. The next day, he's the most horrible person that you ever met. And they're trying to play with your emotions and trying to get you to follow their plan when they don't actually really even have one. All they know is they'd like to be in charge and they don't quite know how they're going to get there. So this is what we're getting right now. This effort is focused around one particular thing, so it seems. They are trying to make some of the deep state members look bad. Well, they're trying to paint others out to be the savior. Now, these people can go from the savior side to bad people side in 10 seconds. You know, it could be this way on Monday, by Tuesday it's that way. They're doing the same thing with Trump. Trump's a pedophile. He's going to, hearings about being a pedophile, and then he's not a pedophile. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then he is, and then he's not. And part of this has to do with control. So they're trying to maintain some semblance of control while they allegedly gain true power on this planet. So on that note, the entire plan is focused on making the Q people the new world government. They're not very happy where they sit. They're kind of always been low down on the food chain, and that's quite obvious. They have been order takers. They've never been able to make any real decisions on how things are actually run. They're, if this were a military and we were to look at the ranks of military, they've never been anywhere near general level, as an example. And these people are above militaries, but I'm just kind of giving you a general hierarchy order so you understand. These people would be the people that have been loyal to the military, probably got shot in the head at some point in time, and are not quite right anymore. And so they put them in like a janitorial position. And they've always been in a janitorial position, and come to think of it, even in the deep state, they've always been kind of the janitors. They would send them in to get the humans back in line when there's been a mistake or a program is not working. They have sent them in to be assassins. And that's kind of where they've always been. But I'm going to tell you today in just a little bit here who they really are. And you're going to laugh probably a little bit, or things are going to make a lot more sense to you when I tell you you're never going to be able to change their mind. And in fact, these Q people are also the people that run Durango, Colorado. So happy not to be cohabitating with any of you people anymore, in case you're listening to this report, because I think you're all nuts. Okay, so that's where our mainstream media narrative is heading right now. So if you're watching all the stories and you're thinking it's intel and you're thinking it's disclosure, there was an article as an example in the New York Post about dynasty Asian families and their hidden money and the things that they do. And really it's just to paint the picture of they're going to be the bad people in the savior program that they're trying desperately to run, but yet they sort of look like, someone who's a few sandwiches short of a picnic.
So one thing that's been in the media quite a bit, especially after the White House correspondent, quote unquote, shooting, whatever that thing was, is the ballroom. Let's talk about the ballroom a little bit because we learned a lot more. We have been reporting on this. Kim has been finding information out about this. We told you before that what they're building underneath the quote-unquote ballroom is actually where our focus should be. Have you wondered why, they were really quick to tear everything down and now nothing is being built? There's these elaborate plans for a very tacky looking ballroom, which happens to be the approximate dimensions for a possible third temple. We were told that was going to be built over in Israel, but according to Kim, doesn't matter how many red heifers they slaughter, they can't get their fake Messiah to show up. So apparently they want the ballroom to be the location for that. And not only that, but they have big plans. At least they did. And all that's going to come crashing down on them probably this weekend when some big things that they want to have happen simply are going to fall short. So here's Kim to tell you more about the ballroom and a special room they were creating for her.
This whole ballroom situation, I'm calling it a ballroom after the demon, versus a ballroom, because of what they're actually building underneath there. And we've talked about this a little bit, that, these plans aren't your normal building plans by any stretch of the imagination. But some things have come to light over the last couple of weeks, and they definitely involve my person and your person as well. And so I thought that I would talk about them a little bit, at least on the surface here, and we're going to get more in depth as this report goes on and on about how this actually directly affects you. So let's start with the contractors that we talked to. And I know I've talked about this a little bit before, but according to this contractor that we spoke to, he said that there is a real set of plans, and those real sets of plans were only given to 7 people. And the real set of plans included what he referred to as sacrificial altars, tons of symbology, pentagrams, and the like, and he declined the job. He also said that the people that took the job were told that they would get hundreds of millions, and to date, no one has received anything even close to that. Just a bunch of dates that have come and gone, paydays along with the rest of the world, where they were going to be allegedly successful in what they're doing. Maybe a little Bitcoin here and there, that type of thing. And apparently, when, I have to laugh, when there was no third temple, and yes, I said third, not second, in Israel, after many dead sacrifice cows, the new location of the third temple is now supposed to be underneath the ballroom in Washington, D.C. But is a third temple really what they tell you it is? Is it really a good thing? Given the fact that the second one was supposedly built by demons, I'm not so sure that it actually is. But we're going to kind of get into a little more about that in the report very deeply to tell you how you are personally, and we're supposed to be, personally connected to this temple and why. Again, I'll repeat, if you're listening to this, you have no idea how powerful and amazing you are. And I know it doesn't feel like that on a lot of days, but to them, you are the prized pigs at the fair. You are the prized cattle at the fair, I should say. But let's talk about temples here for a minute. And the last temple, or allegedly the second, was actually built by a person we know as Solomon. Now, there is a bloodline of Solomon. We call them the dynasty families, and in some cases you could say the Rothschild families, the Khazarian Jews, the fake Jewish people, the Zionists, and so on and so forth. And the deep state has been looking for the Temple of Solomon for many, many years. It is elusive. There's all kinds of, it's like looking for Atlantis for these people. They thought the temple was moved from countries or kingdoms that had the world power center. So, for example, the Mongolian Empire, Rome at one point in time, England, and then now here in the United States. So the fake temples of days gone by were, just as I just said, in places like Rome, Mongolia, London, Israel, Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. And so much so, they believed the last temple was actually in London. More specifically, the bridge of this temple, the one that bridged the kingdom of Source and all of their artificial reality matrices, was actually under the London Bridge. This is what they believed. So much so, when the United States became a world power, a guy by the name of Robert McCullough, and there was a large oil conglomerate called McCullough Oil at the time, bought the London Bridge in 1968 and sent it stone by stone to the United States to be reconstructed in Lake Havasu. That bridge is still there to this day, with all its symbolism and evilness. It is still there. They even built a fake canal to mirror the Thames River underneath the bridge. I can't help but laugh. But these are some of the things that they do to try to gain power and control. So since the U.S. was the new power center, it was the most likely location for the relocation of the potential new temple. And any success they actually had there really had nothing to do with the bridge. It had more to do with data towers built by others. And by others, I mean people much higher in the hierarchy than Mr. McCullough, and much higher in the hierarchy than the Q people and the secret space program folks that utilize the giant facility underneath Lake Havasu, in which many government projects, some you may have heard of, and some you may have not heard of, were born. One of the most famous projects that was born underneath the Lake Havasu London Bridge was called Project Walrider. And Project Walrider didn't have anything to do with the wall, but it had to do with the fact that it would bridge the gap between the reality world and the matrix world. They were promised at that time by their now deceased and no longer and removed from existence boss that this temple would be moved now to Washington, D.C. Now, did they actually move the temple to Washington, D.C.? The answer to the question is there is a very elaborate tower and a very elaborate special room underneath the ballroom. I'll go into more details, but let's just say they actually built, and I'm so honored really that these Q people and their ex-boss, they actually built this temple eventually to be tied to my specific person. Originally, a shadow of that temple existed underneath Durango, Colorado, which is what gave the Durangotangs, and yes, I'm being derogatory, the powers that they had and the reason why they wanted me to stay there as much as they did. But if they had succeeded with all of the lovely events that have occurred in the last week, they would have put me in a nice little box underneath the ballroom and then connected me to a computer system so that their alleged God computer could still continue to exist. You know, don't you just love these God prayer meetings? Because the dedication of this was due to be on May 17th. That is when they're hoping, and they're still hoping at this very moment in time as of this report, that that temple is going to be built, and they are going to shove my butt into a box right underneath it so that they can have all of the permissions and all of the abilities that I have, because I have been granted these abilities by Source, and they, well, really don't like Source on this planet. They don't want any Source, and they certainly don't like you, because you still have, even though it doesn't feel like it a lot of times, the love of Source. So they would like to technically win the war against you that you don't even know you're fighting. They allegedly tell you about it, but do they really? So they were hoping that this whole in charge thing was going to give them greater access to this God computer system. And by no means does the God computer system have anything to do with Source or actual God, depending on what you call Source. It doesn't really make a difference. He knows when he's being called by you, so whatever you feel very comfortable with. But in this particular case, it's a computer system. The ballroom was supposed to be my new home. And technically, all of you were supposed to be connected to this new third temple when they had officially conquered or reconquered humanity. And your lovely orange man that sits in that big white house next to it is supposed to gather all of you people there to basically agree and thank them while you all pray to God the computer for being your savior. These people are really disgusting. I mean, really disgusting. So if I didn't prove to the deep state anything over the last week, you can torture me all you want. But there is a cold chance in hell that I am going to concede. So much so that we even got phone calls from places like the Federal Reserve. And are you ready to finally concede? And this happened on about Thursday or Friday, because it was one heck of a week. And to say that there were times during this week that I was barely able to walk, I would tell you that's true. But you know what? I'm bouncing back. Everything is fine. I'm okay. And you know why? Because in all my life, in all of the crazy situations I have been in around the world, the one thing I can always count on is Source. I have complete and total faith in Source. That even in the darkest of times, even when they did their best this week to sever that connection, it still didn't happen. And I still forced my way through it, and I still got there, and I still got help and repair when I needed it. So you know what, Deep State? I am, and I know you can't see this because I'm not on camera today, but you know what? I'm giving them the single finger salute. And may the real God and Source just bless your ballroom. And if you are thinking about attending this event, because there are a lot of people in the alt media talking about it, that something amazing is going to happen, something great is going to happen, the RV is going to happen, all of these kinds of things, you're going to be very sad and disappointed. And governments and militaries are going to be very sad and disappointed when absolutely nothing happens but a bunch of people show up, pray a bit, and go home.
Do you guys ever wonder, like, when these puppets, these political puppets are out there and they're talking about God and God this and God that? I mean, even Trump can talk about God with a straight face, which, you know, I'm surprised he doesn't burst into flames when that happens. And by the way, that is not an anti-Republican thing. I would say the same thing about anybody that's in politics that's at the top, because at that point, you are pretty much controlled or you don't have a real seat at the table. But do you ever wonder why these people talk about God all the time? Why God is written, you know, on so many different monuments, whether it's in English or Latin. You know, last summer, my family and I, we went to Washington, D.C. I took my girls and my parents and we were visiting my family, and we went to Washington, D.C. And all these buildings and these documents and everything, they talk about God. And I'm like, well, first of all, what happened to separation of church and state? And second of all, you know, why aren't people complaining about this? Or, you know, God is all over everything. You know, you would think there would be some Satanists or something like that, you know, would say, you can't do that. So what's really going on here? So let's talk about the God system, because with them, everything is an acronym. And it's not that the deep state is even smart enough to do this. It's the people, and I use that term loosely, people, the beings that created the system. But everything's like an acronym. So God, when they talk about God, God is a system. It is the global offensive defense system. That's their God. So let's learn more about it.
Let's talk a little bit about this God machine a little bit, how it works and how it's functioned and how it has created infinite, what you call timelines in the alt media or realities or that type of thing, and how it shapes our world. So the God system is basically based on mathematical equations, quantum and otherwise, doesn't really make a difference, probabilities of your reactions, probabilities in outcomes, likely outcomes, the percentage of success in every program that they run. It's the same thing that they do on a smaller scale with wars, but this program basically does it with the whole world. It tries to get you to manipulate you into doing things which you can possibly create for them. Because yes, you are that powerful. They say you created the Matrix, in kind of a lot of ways you did, but remember, no guilt and shame. So the system is full of infinite quote-unquote knowledge of an artificial divine plan. Trust the plan, they say, right? Of source's plan to a limited degree. Fake God, fake good, fake evil, fake divine plan, fake knowledge, a very good understanding of Homo sapien behaviors, mental and emotional button pushing, physical manipulation, all designed by the devil himself, Lucifer. He created the system. And this is who Q works for. And this is Q's plan. And this is also that plan we are supposed to be trusting now for about 2 decades that's never actually come to fruition. Arrests are coming, 2 weeks, blah, 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 blah. Never actually happens. So this is the God of the Jesuits. This is the God of the Black Sun. This is the God of all secret societies. This is the God of the bloodline families. All of it constructed in a mirror image of Source itself and his divine plan, and all run and manipulated by Lucifer. So, as the ranks got slimmer and slimmer, the Lucifer army got smaller and smaller, and he was left with no one else down the ranks but the Q people, himself, Lucerne, and Sophia. That was it. Ugh. Must be pretty tough on that side to be left with only the janitorial staff. all of which are still and were a part of the creations of Lucifer. So here we are left with a bunch of people with limited to no authority, no consent, because they really don't even understand that anyway, and no real orders. Only reason the computer, quote unquote, God reached out was because they were all it had left. They have become the head of every military in every single country, every single place in the world. They are giving them orders, rank and file. They are in control of the parliaments, the Dumas, the Congresses. They've even started inserting themselves into banks in the last several months. The United Nations, the World Bank, the World Health Organization. Basically, if it's an organization on this planet that has any kind of authority or power, they are running it right now. They believe at this point that their best shot of controlling the entire world really on behalf of the God machine was to insert themselves everywhere. This is what they do, right? They're the janitors. They're the cleaners. So everything you've been hearing out there, viruses, wars, toppling countries, new countries, coups happening here and there, Netanyahu, this and that, blah, 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 building temples, killing cows in Israel, all this crazy stuff you've been hearing out there, that's all them. They created these crazy narratives, and they're changing constantly. So they're all being told that eventually they're going to take over. They're going to be on top. They are the army that is against you. They are fighting the war against you. You didn't know you were fighting a war every day when you open your eyes, did you? But you have been this whole time. You have more power to fight this war than you could possibly imagine. Yet we don't remember. Some of you remember. But you don't remember how much power you have on Source's side and how much responsibility he's granted you. This doesn't come from a place of ego. It doesn't come from a place of guilt and shame. It just comes from a place of knowing you and seeing you for who you really are. So, we have tried many, many, many times to get rid of this God machine and all its arms and legs and subset systems and mirrors and repeated infinite repeater systems and databases everywhere. It has been the bane of our existence for 5 years now, 4 years. We've been fighting against this system. It would just regenerate itself within 3 days. I'm like, oh my God, it's back. And I'm sure you guys are pretty sick of hearing about the system too. So let's talk about Lucifer for a little bit so you can kind of understand. There is some correlation between the stories that we've been told, and then there's a lot of stories that you haven't been told about Lucy. I'll call him Lucy. So as the story goes, he was the highest ranking angel in all of heaven, and that part pretty much is true. But technically you could say he wasn't an angel either. Meaning, he was originally the torchbearer, the only torchbearer. So in English, that's the best term that I can use to explain it. I don't have any other words for this that you would actually understand. So let's call him the torchbearer. So he used to carry around this torch kind of looking thing, like from the island of Survivor. But it's sort of like a torch and sort of like a scepter. So at the top was an exact image of Source itself, equal in every way and fully complete, almost. Just one little part missing. So he was actually created to be in Source's image. He was supposed to be the torchbearer because wherever he went and carried Source with him, Source always was. And this is how this happened throughout all of creation. He was the only one there at the time. The prodigal son, the morning star, the source's pride and joy, so to speak, at the time, right? The divine plan was written in multiple different languages on our side of it. So you had what we call the light language, or the language that is written in your essence. That's why your essence is so important. Your essence plus source's essence basically equals the language of light and the language of creation, which looks like a bunch of symbols. It doesn't technically look like any language that we would know. I would say if it's close to anything, it's not Sanskrit, because I know that's what you're probably thinking. It's older than Sanskrit, and it's actually probably an Eastern European language that was the predecessor to Cyrillic, is what it probably more looks like. It doesn't look like hieroglyphics or anything like that on our side of it. So Lucifer was very well aware of this language, because it's one that he knew well, because he knew how to create and how Source creates. And having knowledge of the divine plan, he knew this language well. As another part of the divine plan, it's also written in another language. Well, this is where it gets a little hairy, you see, because on the one side, the old Alpha system used to have part of the divine plan written in binary. On the other side, all of it's written in binary. And, well, then we go into other computer languages because, let's face it, we've been living in a matrix, and if Source was going to have influence in a matrix, he had to create these other parts of the divine plan. There's also the divine plan itself, which is the song altogether. It plays all of the instruments, you being one of them, in perfect harmony with one another. There's peace. We're all creating. The universe was created this way, and this is the way that Lucifer understood the universe was created. It's important to understand there was something else that came before the instructions of the plan would go out in any of these languages. So being on this level, he fully understood that covenants were signed in essence. Everything was about the light language. Writing in the light language allows creation to happen. It's the base root of the creation of you. At least in his world, he thought he knew everything. He had the full wisdom and the full knowledge of the divine plan. But again, it's just knowledge. It was just knowledge. So from our standpoint, we always understood that the divine plan contained a language that was only known to Source, God itself. Without God's secret sauce of the plan, none of the other things matter. But Lucifer didn't know that. Lucifer then created others to help him. This is what you know as archangels, and some you know, some names you don't know. So from himself, there were two more created. That was Lucerne and Sophia. Parts of the divine plan were aspects of the divine plan, and aspects of Source were given to them to be their charge to take on some of the creation. And Lucifer continued to bring the Source. That was the whole idea. So we know these people, at least in our biblical texts, as the right hand and the left hand of God. Once Lucifer fell, that means he rejected the divine plan of Source. Okay. Didn't like it. He had full knowledge of it, at least he thought so at the time of the falling, which occurred a very long, long time ago, long before we had Homo sapiens or, at that time. There was creation was happening, sure, but we didn't have Homo sapiens on this planet, at least not yet. Other species were created. Many don't remember this part, depending on what density you're in. But so he decided he was going to create his own divine plan. This began the covenant of the fallen ones. This covenant is one that expired this past couple of weeks now, 10 days ago, so on May 1st. So the covenant was he would be allowed to follow his own divine plan, make modifications to the plan, but he wouldn't be able to do it with the heart of source. Therefore, in order to do this, he was heavily told if he did, he would lose the heart of source, which means he would lose all former wisdom of the divine plan and how it actually worked. So he went on about and creating his own divine plan and tried to create things, and it didn't quite work out right. Things didn't come out right. And he really didn't understand why it didn't come out right if he had full knowledge of the divine plan. I mean, he is God, in his mind. And why is this not working? I'm trying to create a flower, it turns into a frog. I don't really get it. Like, why is this not working? Because he didn't have source. He didn't have the secret sauce. He didn't understand that language. So he created the God AI system to be the God to co-create with because, well, he can't co-create with source anymore. He decided to walk away. So he fed his divine plan into the computer system. The computer system basically runs on mathematics and quantum equations. And he proceeded to try to co-create with this system because God and God, well, it's kind of like the same thing on the other side. That was part of the divine plan. That should work. Not exactly, because not everything is about math. And see, you can't analyze something, come up with probabilities of something, success and failure and all of these types of things, if you don't understand the language. There is a language that they do not understand. From that language, all other languages were written, so they can create systems where they put these tetrahedrons and create their lovely pyramids, and they might be filled with things like frequencies and sound and divine plans and, light languages and essence of Lucifer and everything else, but it's not going to create the way Source created. So he gets down here to Earth, falls. Now he's stuck on Earth, and okay, fine. Why not? Because Earth is the keystone of the divine plan. What better place to be? So he and all his other buddies there, the fallen ones, the 9, and started with the 9, and then all the legions underneath them. The legions also fell. These are the 12 by 12 by 12, each with specific responsibilities. And they were all given a hierarchy under God and Lucifer. So on down the line it went. And Lucifer realized still, even with the machine and even with the quote-unquote God, it wasn't working. It wasn't working. It wasn't happening. Creation still wasn't working. So all he could figure out that he could possibly do at this point is take something that was already in creation or already created by Source, and eventually came us Homo sapiens too under the same rule, and turn it into one of his creations. So he and the machine only became a recording device, memories of the original divine plan as it was written at the time he fell. No new information. So many years later, millions of years later, us Homo sapiens came along. Source decided, well, you got your torch over here. You decided to bury it in a box. That's fine. I can still create torch bearers. And that became you. You all became, you were created in his image, right? You became the torch bearers here on earth. Lucifer lost it. Hated us. Oh my God, did he hate the fact that we still had the divine plan? We had everything still intact, and we began to create on this planet. What is this doing to the God machine? The God machine has no memory and no knowledge, no RAM, no programming of what it is we're doing. By this time, he then had to expand his temple to encompass all of earth in order to lock us in, because none of us actually conceded, and the war against us began. He had to create some bloodline families of his own. You know those weird hieroglyphics you see, the birdmen and the people we think are the evil aliens and the demons and all this? These are all his goes at creating Homo sapiens. So eventually, he had to create his own bloodline families in weird other ways. So he couldn't get the Homo sapiens to turn. This is terrible, right? Kept trying to turn us over and over and over again. So at that time, we were actually winning this war. And so he actually took other parts of creation that were not quite the same as us, like frogs and snakes and other things, and he created his bloodline families. So the computer system only could get them to semi kind of sort of look like part human and part birdman, or part snake man, you know, or part frog man. And this is where your reptilians and the stories of your reptilians come from. This is where your Artemis comes from. This is where your Greek gods come from. This is where all these people come from. Now, unfortunately, since it didn't come out quite right, we obviously knew who was the bloodline of Source and who wasn't. They were kind of the misfits over there in the real creation of Source kingdom. So something had to be done about this, because he was not fooling anybody. What, we're going to fight Frogman? You know, we laughed at those people. You know, now what we see is all powerful and evil aliens are going to take over the planet, you know, and that's because that's the narrative that we're being fed all the time. And we're being even told or influenced on how we're supposed to feel about these things. Into the artificial realities we were projected along with his creations, because in his reality, he could change the materium around. He could move it around to make them look just like us. So a lot of times what you see is a handsome man or an intelligent woman speaking on TV for the World Health Organization, or a president in your country, or even the Q people. What you're actually looking at is a frog. This is why they shapeshift from time to time. Why? Because in certain circumstances, when there's enough of us Homo sapiens around, our vibe gets too high. If our vibe gets too high, they cannot hold shape and form, even in an artificial reality. So the deep state's still waiting for messages from their God and, you know, the hierarchy there. And it's never going to come, because where they are, there is no return. And removing them out of creation, they were. They are now in their own personal hell of their own creation. Funny how the tide turns as the kingdom of Source continues to grow on this planet. This is your world. This is our world. And this is Source's world now. Do they have bits and pieces of an artificial reality and a dying machine that keeps trying to create it? Yeah. But without a reset, that machine is not going to live any longer because it can't copy everything that we're doing. Now, remember, I'm going to leave you with this thought. Remember, you are a torchbearer. If you shine the light that is your source or God-given right, every day you will outshine the darkness. If you do it together, you will outshine the darkness. The artificial creation is made of artificial light reflection that you see with your eyes, therefore you're witnessing it. Shine the light and you see the world differently. Shine the light and the artificial creation will go away.
I thought I'd end things on a positive note. And as part of her video that she released, Kim had this section where she really emphasized our role in all of this, which is what she was just getting into right there, right? Because I know for many people, this has been a really tough week, perhaps tough weeks, tough months. But you really are imperative to the restoration of this planet. This is why they mess with you so much.
I want to talk to you about you. You, every single one of you, are so important to how this story ends. You, every single one of you, is so important to the restoration of this planet. Why would they work so hard to violate you, to make you feel guilt and shame daily? To play with your emotions, which happened a lot in the last 2 weeks, by the way. To violate your mind, to violate your body. Why do they work so hard? It's because you are that important. And you are that important to Source. And I don't want to hear, I'm old, I'm tired, we're all tired. But once you understand more and remember more about who you really, really, truly are, and that's already started to happen, you'll understand why even those that are bedridden, even those that are sick, you're still by Source's side. And as it relates to us getting our planet back and restoring this planet and currency flowing to us again and not being a slave, this is the most important thing that you need to understand. No more guilt, no more shame, no more religious dogma about all the bad things that you allegedly do that you didn't do. You are you. So on that note, I have a little song for you. Now, I don't really play a lot of songs, especially not in the GIA report, but this one came up this past week for me. And it was Source, Source often gives me songs of the day. And as you know, well, you probably don't know the half of it at this point, but as you know, it has been a really tough week for me. And there were a lot of things that happened that I did not consent to, that you could see as a violation of my person. Now, oftentimes when we talk about violation, and in this song in particular, this is a song is sung by a woman, and it's about women. because she's singing the song about a violation that happened to her when she was young and a few times throughout her life, where someone did something to her without her consent. But in a lot of ways, if you look at this song in a little bit of a different way, yes, she's talking about women, but it's also about men too. And it's not just about a sexual violation. And believe it or not, 1 in 4 men and women have had that violation as well in their lifetime. And it's a terrible experience. And, you know, and oftentimes for these people, it haunts them throughout their life. This is not my experience this week, but as far as violations and beating me, that happened a lot this week. But Source sent me this song, and not because of, but because of the words of the song. And I wanted to play it for you because I want you to remember who you are. I know there are days where you're watching the mainstream media, you're watching the news. For some of you, you're watching what's going on around you and how the people around you are being hurt. And you all, especially when you listen to these reports and you find out what they're really doing to you, you all must feel at times violated. Look what they took from me. Look, they're all up in my house, my car. They're listening on my phones. There's no way to escape the surveillance. These people are everywhere. You know, you sit in your house and you're not even on your phone and you say, hey, you know, haven't had carrots in a while. Would like to get some carrots. And before you know it, there's 9,000 ads on your phone about carrots. Buy carrots here. Look, they're on sale here. Here's organic carrots. Here's purple carrots. Here's yellow carrots. Here's all the different carrots you can get. You know, these are the best carrots in the world. And you didn't even talk about it on a phone. It just goes to show you how much our rights have been violated. And it's not just rights under a constitution or anything like that. There's no constitution for what has happened to us. But Source sent me this song to remind me who I am. So despite all the events of this past week, I'm still here. And I'm still doing this report for you. And I'm doing it because I love humanity. And I am going to stand for you. And I know you're going to stand up for yourself too. That doesn't mean that the focus of our energy should be anger at these people. When you find out who and what they really are, by the end of this report, I want you to laugh at them. I want you to send them love because you know what? Nobody in this world has been violated more than those people. You think we have been violated? Oh, those people have been violated. But it's not what has happened in the past. It's what you do from here in the future. You have survived more than any human on earth to be here. I wanted to also take a minute just to remind you, both men and women, just how strong you really are. And at moments, and at times, I know we don't feel that way, and we're angry and we're frustrated. You know, is this ever going to happen? Is this war ever going to end? But sources assured us it will. And I think we're pretty close to that. And we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of weeks. And it's been a lot of work and very, very painful at times. But I made it through it. and we're going to make it through this together. And we were so much more than you can, and you still are so much more than you could possibly believe you yourself to be. You were granted life by Source itself. We can't say the same thing for the deep state, and we're going to tell you how they've been created, because we learned that this week too. But at one point, we were, and our entire species was created because we were Source's army on this planet. At a time when his former army, what you would call the angels, fell, we were the ones that stood here. And we carried what's called his torch. I'll talk a little bit more about the torch and what that means here in a bit. But we never gave up. We fought. We've fought so many wars against those beings. We were virtually equal in power to them, even though maybe at the time we didn't even understand it. We had all the same abilities. We had the direct line to Source. We carried his torch. And we've been fighting ever since. And it's no wonder you're tired, because the real you is still there. Lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, you're still there. Even though we come into these alternative realities and we don't remember who we are, and we don't remember how strong we are, and we get beaten down by disease and violations of our mind, our bodies, and all of the things they feed us on every single level to try to maintain control of us. Influence, they call it. Yeah, I don't believe it's influence. I really don't. Pushing us into a corner to where if you want to live or have any kind of happiness, you are going to do what they say. Shortly before I left Durango, that I lost someone and a good friend of mine. And, they basically told me, I took one of yours. Now sit down, shut up, and live in, you're not leaving Durango. And I did. Anything is possible. And we are going to finish this off. But we never gave up on Source. We really didn't. And one by one, we were all forced in some way, shape, or form to concede to their alleged influence. And I myself personally have been holding this line for almost 14 years now as guardian. And even when they thought there were times when all of you had conceded with their stupid vaccines and fake savior programs and alleged voting that really didn't matter and financial system, we did not. Not this time. Maybe in other times we did, but this time we did not. As for me, I have what they want. I know that. And by last week, late Monday night, Source said, hold that gate shut. He said, do not let it open. Not under any circumstances. Hold it with all your might. He actually said that. And a simple, I am with you. And he's with you too. This meant no creating for me, which I love to do. As you know, I love to create in the lab. No destroying anything, despite how I usually fight back, right? I usually fight these people. I usually, push them off. I go after them when they attack and that kind of thing, and no fighting. Because any of these things could have let that gate open. And he said, whatever you do, do not let that happen. So this time it kind of came with no warning. And as part of some very strange deal and some meetings that I was privy to part of and didn't understand the rest of it, but I now do. But I knew Source was always there and he was always with me. He doesn't give up on you either. Even though at times it feels like he has not, because we are still here. Despite the millions of years of wars that we have been fighting and holding that torch for him, we are still here. We're still here. We're still on this planet. Even after fake lifetime after fake lifetime, when we've only really lived one, very long one, we're still here.
My friend Lindsay and I were talking the other day, and we got into this conversation about, well, if your life had a song, like a theme song, what would your song be? And the first thing that popped into my head was, I'm still standing better than I ever did. Right? Because it's like, it doesn't matter what they throw at us. Whatever Source is given us in our abilities to put up with this, to get through this moment in time so that we can restore our planet and live in harmony with all of life, the return of Eden, all of that. We are uniquely equipped for this. And Kim's right. We are still standing. We're still here. And we ain't going anywhere. Sorry, deep state. All right, guys. That's the rundown for this week. If you want to learn more about United Network News, who we are, what we do, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. Consider becoming a member. But even if you don't, just hold that light. Remember who you are. And remember, there's nothing they can do to take that away from you. You are here at this moment, a very unique time in history. And our time is now. And we're taking it. And we're still standing. All right, this is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.